We're streaming now.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, going back to that motion that the Pelham Finance and Audit Committee recommend that Council appoint Deloitte as auditors for the 2020 calendar year. Could I have a mover, please? Bill, Michael, seconder. All in favor? So carried. Thank you. Okay, so now we're at the 8.1 operating financial reports report to council. So Teresa, I'll turn that over to you.
Okay, so this report is the December 31st, 2019 report that the audit committee is used to receiving. It's in that same format that you normally get. So we have detailed revenue report with all the notes there. We have a detailed expenditure report with all the notes why things have gone up and down. We have the 12 months for the Meridian Community Center, which we're very pleased to announce that at the end of the year, we're actually down $400,000. So either we have both an increase in revenue from the projected budget and a decrease in expenditures. So that was really good news. Big part of that has to do with the utilities. There's about $250,000 of savings in the utilities for the community center with regards to all of the initiatives that was taken on by the Utility Sustainability Committee. And also the activity at the community center is just incredible. The arena revenues, so the budget was $539,000 and it came in at $611,000. So a lot of activities, even the public skating. The director of recreation just comments on the number of people that are coming public skating. So it was, the community center has been very well received and a lot of things going on in there. We also received a grant, the grant for the seniors, their senior grant. And so there's a whole new, as you know, that the community center is a designated senior hub. And there's only a few of them in the province that have that designation, and we're one of them. And so there's a lot of activities happening there with the seniors. And even now with the COVID going on now, they're doing a lot of activities online. So those programs are still continuing with the seniors. That's very exciting. And then from these reports, you can see all the activities that the actual activities that happened. And then there's the hydro chart, and it's nice to see that in comparison to the first year, how much lower the actual consumption is for the hydro. And then the last appendix is the one relating to the transit. And the transit is just about almost $9,000 over the original budget. The ridership is up quite a bit. The ridership in 2018 was 7,259, and in 2019 was 8,476. So a lot of good activities with the transit. And then also we have here all the capital reports. So we have listed the 2019 capital projects and the status of the projects. And also there's a column here showing the carry forward that some of these projects that aren't completed, we're going to complete them this year. And then we also have, we always show prior years projects that were approved in the prior years, but still not completed. Some of these projects are very large and it's multi-years. It could be a few years to complete some of these large road projects. But this is important for council to know the status of these capital projects and where we're at with them. So I think that covers all of, sorry, I went on with the number 9 and 10 as well. So I kept going here. So if there's any questions with regards to any of these specific reports that the committee is used to seeing. This is more detail than you would see in the financial statements.
Teresa, there's just also under earlier on the agenda under 8.1 and 8.2, just to make sure we don't miss it, is the summary report on the year end and then the recommended surplus allocation for the year. So I just wanted to make sure if we move on with these ones, we circle back to those ones as well.
Right. So 8.2 has a breakdown of the surplus. So the first one is the operating budget, which had a surplus of $988,572. There was a transfer as part of the reserve policy. We transferred out $147,000 to the land reserve, and that's something that we're going to be doing for the next 10 years in order to bring that negative reserve balance down to zero. And then there was a transfer from the roads reserve for the winter control. So with winter control, if we go over, last year was a very cold year, then we have to borrow. We transfer from the reserve to cover the shortfall. If there's a surplus in that account, then we transfer into the reserve the surplus in order to help in those years when we're short. So so the overall surplus, the excess of revenue over expenditures, this is the modified cash basis, is the $962,338. The other areas, the building permit. So the building department is self-funded. Any excess in revenue goes to the building permit, the building department reserve. And this year they had a surplus of $243,509. With regards to the water rate, so we actually had a deficit this year. I think there was lower consumption in water, and that all relates to the weather. I think there was a lot of rain last summer. So there was a deficit of $73,896. So there was a transfer from the water reserve to cover that shortfall. This budget has to balance out to zero. The wastewater, the revenue less expenses also had a deficit, and that was $24,380, and we had a transfer from the wastewater to cover that shortfall. So these are our budgets. And then at the bottom of the sheet, we have the 2019 tax levy. So our operating surplus, what we're recommending that we allocate that surplus to various reserve accounts. And so we have them listed here. As you recall, when we brought the reserve policy to the audit committee, there's a large gap of the amount of funds that we actually have in the reserve and what we actually need to meet the future capital needs. So we're just trying to allocate a little bit to these various reserves here. Charlotte, did you want to go through some of these here? I can go through them too.
Sure. Yeah, sure, I can. Yeah. So the first thing we recommended we do is transfer back into the roads reserve for the winter control. So the way that the reserve and reserve policy is written, we have to do the transfers the way that they're outlined. So even though we knew we had enough in the operating budget to cover that shortfall in winter control, the policy says that it gets transferred from the roads reserve, so that's what we did. But we're recommending essentially we put that back into the roads reserve because there was enough to cover it for this year. The second item is to transfer into the roads reserve to cover the capital budget shortfall. So council may recall that when we prepare the capital budget, we compare on a cash flow basis what we will bring in terms of reserve transfers and grants based on what we're anticipating compared to the expenditures. And there was actually, on a cash basis, the expenditures exceeded what we anticipated coming in or from the tax levy through reserve transfers. So we're recommending we also transfer that into the roads reserve. And one of the main reasons we're focusing on the roads reserve there is you may remember when we projected the reserve balances, the roads reserve is the one that really has the greatest need because there are so many capital projects coming down the line. The next item is the elections reserve towards the cost of a by-election. The next one is and then all of the next few, facilities, IT, parks, planning, cemetery, and municipal drainage. Essentially, we looked at the amount that was left, and then we compared their deficit balances. So all of those reserves are in deficits. They have negative balances. So we took their proportional share compared to each other and recommended that we transfer the remaining amount in there in order to try to reduce their deficits. And then that leaves approximately $100,000 in the working funds reserve for contingencies related to COVID-19.
So those balances that you move to reduce the deficits, that does not reduce their deficit then?
It won't wipe them out entirely. Okay. No, it just, it will reduce them, but it's still not enough.
Doesn't eliminate it.
No.
It doesn't eliminate it, but it starts to reduce it. And then that's what's critical here. We have to start moving towards reduce the deficits and then building the reserves to actually be the right number to meet the capital needs that we have. So it's supporting the philosophy of the reserve policy.
Yeah, no, I don't have a problem with that. I was just clarifying the language for myself, really.
Well, I have a question, and I think I know the answer, but I'd rather ask it anyways. So the audited financial statements we just reviewed, the difference between those and what you're presenting now from a December 31st, the surplus is significantly different. And I assume it's the accrual versus modified cash basis that's creating that, but just wanted staff to comment to confirm that that is in fact the case.
Yes, there is a significant difference between our surplus that we show on our financial reports to council, which are based on a modified cash basis. So for example, we have items in our expenditures, such as reserve transfers. So if an amount transfers into a reserve, on the financial statements, that's not an expense. So that creates like a different net surplus number on our financial statements than it shows on the monthly reports to council. Another example would be principal payments on debt. So our budget includes an amount for the principal payments because on a cash basis, we have to pay that debt. But principal payments on debt are not an expense in the financial statement. So that's why you will see a different number. It won't necessarily tie into the financial statements, but there is a note in the financial statements. I'm just going to see if I can find it quickly. And it is based on a report that we're required to bring to council every year. And it's found in note 15 to the financial statements. And that is where we reconcile the budget as you see it on the financial statements compared to the budget as it's presented in these reports to council.
And then one other question. So actually, I'm going to make a comment first because I didn't do it earlier on when we reviewed the financial statements. So I wanted to commend the staff on the clean audit in live streaming in camera because I think I did that in the closed session. So kudos to you. Also, in relation to the result of the financials for 2019, this is definitely the town is moving in the right direction on this. And the recommendation put forward on replenishing reserves and planning for the future, I think is definitely definitely would have my vote for sure once that goes to table. So I just wanted to comment on that before I asked another question I had, and it's in relation to the recommendation of a reserve. So the one recommendation is the 100K for COVID is. And I don't know what the impact of COVID is expected to be on the town, but my question is knowing the surplus situation that you're fortunate to be in, and if you have a line of sight of the impact or potential impact of COVID, is 100K a good amount, or is that allocation to do in light of this pandemic that we're all wrestling through and working through?
So I'll answer that. in looking at, so, Charlotte and I, we had that conversation, and a couple of things. One, we are all waiting. The municipalities are working together, the 12 municipalities plus the region. We meet on a weekly basis to talk about the impact of COVID. And we are looking towards federal and provincial funding. We don't have the reserves. We don't actually have the cash in the reserves for us even to put more money towards COVID, but we're also looking towards the province and the feds to alleviate some of that pressure for us, which is what they said they're doing. If we don't get anything from the province or the federal government, and whatever the number is, then that, because we don't have cash in the reserves, in these particular reserves, then we would have to apply the deficit into the 2021 budget. So to start off the 2021 budget, you'll start off to cover this year's deficit. That's how you take care of it. You can't have a negative budget. Like, the council can't approve a deficit budget, but you can have a deficit in year. So which is what we are going to have with regards to COVID. Yes. So that's the strategy. Right now, the cash that we do have in the bank is covering the obligatory reserves and the revenue. We have to have that cash. We didn't have that cash before. So that's where we have to meet the municipal guidelines that's a requirement for us to have that cash, and we can't touch it. So I can't spend the DC, obligatory reserve. I can't spend it because it's development charges for COVID. So that's where we're really being strict on that, because that's how the town had issues in the past.
Okay. So part of it is strategic.
Yes.
In the event funding opportunity presents itself, the town would be well positioned to put their name forward for some support in relation to COVID relief.
Right, and the region right now is collecting the information on behalf of the 12 area municipalities plus the region to do one submission to say this is the impact of COVID to the Niagara region. And I don't know, David, if you want to talk what the CEOs are talking about with regards to that. It's just like to speak in one voice to say that there's, a big need for support.
We're saying the same things you are, Teresa, just with, fewer of us are accountants. So I say things, debit equals credit. That makes do for the financial discussion. But no, in all seriousness, exactly that. Obviously, our conversation is a little more about politics, a little less about the actual accounting function. But we are in lockstep.
Yeah, so it is very strategic, Bill, to see if we can get funding first. And then if we can't get funding, then we will go to the tax base.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, and I just wanted to say, I think this is a pretty solid package now. The detail, has improved significantly from previous years. And so again, I'd just like to thank the staff. It's been a tremendous move forward. Nothing's ever perfect, but it's a significant improvement, and thanks for your efforts.
Thank you.
So looking at the agenda, there's nothing there to say that we move to accept the reports. Is that correct?
Right. Well, so we should say that that the Pelham Audit and Finance Committee receive the reports. So the operating financial report, the MCC operating financial report, the transit operating financial report, the capital report, and those reports. We should say that.
Okay, so could I have someone move that we accept those reports? Bill, Michael, seconder, all in favor? So carried. And Teresa, there was something that the reserve report. Do we have to then make a motion on that?
Right. So with the reserve report, because we have that recommended allocation of the surplus to the reserves, we would like this motion to go to council that the Pelham Finance and Audit Committee receive the reserves report and that the chair include in his letter to council to recommend the approval of the surplus allocation to the reserves. So that's what we would like if the audit committee is in agreement.
So any comments with respect to that? Okay, so could I have a motion then to accept the reserve recommendations? So Michael, Bill, all in favor? So carried. Thank you. Do you want to talk about financial risks, Teresa?
I don't have anything under that. I mean, right now, with regards to the COVID-19 report, that is going directly to council at the May 19th meeting. So I would say that that's the area of financial risk that we have right now.
Can you talk generally at all about that? Just that wouldn't be out of school with what's going forward to council, or?
Well, what we're doing is we're looking at the so as you're aware, we closed down the Meridian Community Center mid-March, and all the activities there have been shut down. So we're looking at all the revenue sources in the 2020 budget and updating that budget to say, if this activity doesn't happen, what's the revenue shortfall, and looking at our expenses to say, where have we increased our expenses in relation to COVID. So for example, we're doing a lot more cleaning. So our cleaning expenses have gone up, bylaw officers, there's more enforcement. And, but then on the other side, we have had layoffs. So we have salary savings because certain activities aren't happening. So we're just doing an updated projected what the impact of that is. Also, we've waived interest and penalties for property taxes and wastewater for 3 months. So for April, May, and June. So that alone is $100,000 of a cost to the town, because it's approximately $30,000 to $27,000 and $30,000 a month of lost interest revenue. So I would include that as a lost revenue. So just going through the list of just the revenue impact and the expenditure impact, and then what is the town doing to mitigate some of that, the cost. So I would list that as well to say what are some of the things we're doing to save and to bring that number down.
Strategically, at the start of, about a week into the pandemic, we wrote a sort of a quick and dirty report to council on the very initial sort of financial shock. Here's stuff we do know, right? Like a week in. This report that Charlotte and Teresa have been working on is a much deeper dive. And here we are 6 weeks, 7 weeks later, 6.5 weeks later, working on a much deeper dive. We haven't exactly negotiated. I don't think any of the three of us know exactly when we'll bring the next one, but I kind of, as a default, like around the 6 week mark. I want there to be enough change. I think this one will have a very good analysis of, obviously, of costs incurred. That's relatively easy to do. Where our minds are going next are in reopening and how we're going to have to do business differently. And differently is almost universally a code for more expensively or less efficiently, but one of the two is almost always correct, right? With more distancing tends to lead to either lower volume or somehow higher cost, right? Whatever that is. For instance, it does not look our choices are either come down to installing, fiberglass barriers in the trucks that the public works staff use, and that might work, or one truck per. So at the moment, we've temporarily leased more vehicles, but the town of Pelham keeps a really tiny, like a small fleet. Per capita, we do not have a lot of motor vehicles. So going forward, we're either going to have to figure out and endorse to council that we lease more or buy more, or but somehow that's going to be higher. And we haven't wrapped our minds around that. And I think that'll be where we go with the next report in about 6 weeks from now, because there'll be a bunch more best practice. We are not alone. Several other I think every other municipality worth its salt's having this conversation right now and trying to figure out what the new normal looks like. But kind of across the board, I cannot conceive of a new normal that doesn't involve us doing a deep clean of the town hall monthly, more often if we figure out someone's had coronavirus and been in the building. That's $1,200 to $1,500 a pop, for instance, right on top of an already enhanced cleaning. Probably more vehicles, see where that's going. But those pieces, I don't think we've been able to do through no fault of our own. But I don't think we've been able to do a deep enough dive. And I don't think we fully appreciate our new cost structure. And I think we'll be able to give much better advice on that a month and a half from now, give or take a little bit.
And the other thing too, in talking to the director of recreation and what she's hearing from her group, is that, we don't even know of something as, simple as hockey in September. Can you actually have the kids or the hockey players come in? They're saying now they don't want anyone to take showers. So you have to come in fully clothed, just put your skates on and leave. And can you have X number of people even on the ice? So we don't even know any of that. And that definitely will have an impact on our revenue. If they can't have full games. Just think of Junior B. A lot of the revenue comes from people attending the games. And what if we can't have crowds? What does that mean for the Junior B team?
Just the whole use of the facility. Yes. How can you even open the doors and let anybody through the doors? But I think at least you're going to get a good handle on what your minimum cost level is to have that facility.
Right.
Not, not operating, but functional. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of a scary proposition.
Yes.
And all of that is, is directed by the province. It's not, public health. We don't have control. So that's what we're working on.
So would it be worthwhile? I know there's a report going to council. David, you had said that 6 weeks after, roughly 6 weeks, I won't hold you to 6 weeks or whatever, but there's going to be a period after that where there's going to be another report to council. Yes. Would it be worthwhile updating the entire audit committee after that second report? So instead of waiting till our next meeting of September 9th, that we have a further report or a further meeting in, let's say, 8 weeks from now?
Well, it's easy for me to volunteer others, but I certainly think if you as a collective were inclined to an extra meeting, by the time you have so there'll be a report publicly available roughly this time next week, like Wednesday or Thursday next week. The one that Teresa and Charlotte are working on will be entered the public domain, right, with our published deadline. And so 6 weeks after that, we'll have much better, yet again, informed one. You'll have three reports, two of which we had time to write and think about, and we'll be well into the event. So certainly some professional guidance on that, some commentary on how we're presenting the data, because let's face it, this is not a traditional report or event for us. We're working on what we think is a reasonable way, but certainly open to feedback there. And then beyond that, well, whatever advice you see fit to give, reasonableness of expenditures, how we're characterizing them, whatever that happens to be. I think there'd be a lot of benefit in this committee providing that. The council's shown itself to have a pretty fair, adept hand at the social and political and sort of daily life service impacts of coronavirus. We've been doing a lot of reporting on those things. We've had very good dialogue, and council's made a number of decisions. So I think it's in good hands there. We haven't yet presented it with the detailed financial analysis. The first report really, I don't know if it was written in 36 hours, maybe something like that. It was, my terminology, quick and dirty. It was reasonable, but so now you'd have a couple to really sink the teeth into, and I think that'd be a good use of time, because we would like to get independent guidance if we could. Or validation of the staff approach or suggestions for improvement, because we're not flying blind. We're trying to do as other municipalities are. Teresa and Charlotte get to hear from other area treasurers so that we're not, completely out in left field. But we're also using our best guesses as far as a reasoned approach.
Okay,
so another meeting in 8 weeks.
My question would be, should we be then meeting shortly after the next council meeting or after that second report?
I think after that, well, if I had my druthers, I would have this group meet just after the second report. And the reason I say that is, council will make substantially its political decisions and its resource allocation decision. That's fine. But where we could get better, or maybe we can't get better, I don't know. But then this group could really talk about the manner in which we're presenting the data, the manner in which we're accounting. We're throwing everything in one ledger, right, to the best of my knowledge. Or correct me if I'm wrong. But I think we're throwing all of it in just one ledger at the moment for simplicity, so we have a corona cost, says the non-accountant, right? But that's kind of how I think we're doing it. So I think there's as Michael was saying, he feels we've improved how we're presenting data so far, and we're doing that because we had a bunch of suggestions. I'd kind of like to see if we're on the right track vis-a-vis corona costs, and you've got perspectives from other organizations, so that would be useful.
Or I'm just curious, or does the committee want to see the second report right before it goes to council? I don't know.
I don't think that really matters, because we wouldn't have time to provide any input anyway. So if we do it before or after, I don't think the timing matters that much. I would assume your regular reporting anyway is going to identify the revenue loss, revenue deficit drops and things anyway. So, but.
Yeah, I think I might see it a little bit differently. If you're looking for feedback from this group on how to present data, and if there's anything we can bring from our respective sectors on us working through this same pandemic, I think it's probably advantageous to do before the council meeting. If you want that feedback for incorporation at the council meeting, from a timing perspective, that would definitely make more sense from my end. The other thing, and it's just a comment, and that's not to say that the team's not already doing this. And I'm just going to pick up on your one comment, Dave, about either going to be a higher cost or less efficient. I think realizing we're not going back to or we're not going to see anything normal in the next year probably or so. I would just suggest keep an open mind. Look at this as an opportunity to how things are being done and whether or not they can be done differently. That may not fall into the analogy you used earlier about less efficient and more cost. So I'm not saying that you can do that on everything, but try and take this as an opportunity to revisit some of the stuff that's currently being done at the town and whether or not there's opportunities that you can incorporate into this report to help mitigate this loss and actually come out of this a little bit more efficient in the long run, to be honest with you. I know that that's an approach we're taking at our organization, and it's actually, I'm suspecting it's going to pay dividends down the road. So anyways, just a comment for consideration as you're developing the various reports as relates to this.
Oh, fair enough. We have a bit of money set aside in the budget to look at office and spacing allocations on our second floor, which is the sort of tightest jam we have corporately. And the people on the second floor, in particular, planners and development engineering types who look over, figure out where pipes are going to go and the like, have been really efficient in working from home. So there's certainly, we're absolutely not going forward with spending any unnecessary money, one, but two, try to do space reallocation if it's possible to keep working from home 3 days a week or 4 days a week and reduce that office demand. So I take your point, absolutely.
I just want to mention one more thing with regards to the COVID report. I am looking at 3 different areas. I'm looking at the impact to cash flow, the impact to the 2020 operating budget, and also if there are any impacts to the 2021 budget. So those are the 3 areas that I'm looking that the report will address.
Okay, so we've got next meeting date of September 9th. I'm not hearing any opposition of meeting earlier than that. What would the recommended or suggested date that we meet next?
Can we?
I think if you do want us, sorry. If you do want us to provide input on that second report, we should meet before it in a way that we could provide input that would be otherwise I don't see the value in meeting any sooner.
Yeah, Mike. So, Michael, I think another benefit of meeting sooner, if we leave it to the September, what date was it? September 9th date. That'll be the first time we're getting a financial report for 2020 fiscal year, which is probably another reason why it makes sense to have a meeting between now and that date, just to get a status update on finances for the calendar year as well. So I think you can make more of an agenda out of it other than just the feedback on the COVID situation. But yeah. I don't know when, so maybe that's over to David. I don't know what the date is of the meeting, or maybe this is something we take offline and staff gets back to us with proposed dates. I think that might be an option to consider.
Yeah, and sorry my preference would be for us to meet a little more frequently anyway. So I'm in agreement with that, and especially with respect to the financial statements, we won't, not seeing anything until September's a long time.
Well, so instead of putting you on the spot, David, why don't we, the suggestion was, why doesn't staff come back to us and provide a suggested date instead of trying to fix a date right now?
Well, we've heard your commentary. How about we get back to you later on this week? Maybe I won't promise tomorrow, but
we won't say this. We won't hold you.
And we'll give you a couple of options and show you where they are relative to the council meetings, and then you can pick amongst those.
It's fair.
Yeah, sounds good.
And we're either going to tell me that it starts at 4 and be real clear about that, or we're going to start at 5. In my brain, it's 5.
Well,
whichever.
We're going to set the meeting and tell you a different time.
Nice. That's my easy way out.
We'll tell you an hour early just to be sure.
This is what I look like, egg on face, huh?
And actually, I think just with respect to our ability to meet this way, will hopefully free up the schedule a little bit. Whereas before I was trying to work around vacation and things. I mean, I can do this when I'm on the road somewhere if I have to. So I think we have more flexibility in dates.
Good.
Great. Perfect. Okay, so any other comments or from the committee? No? So why don't we move to adjournment, that this regular meeting of the Pelham Finance and Audit Committee be adjourned. Could I have a mover, please? Bill, Michael, seconder, all in favor? Okay, so carried. So thanks, everyone. Great work,
Thank
Teresa,
you.
again.
Go Lions.
Thank you.
Get my
Bye.
Vikings background up next time.
Take care, everyone.
Okay,
Take
bye.
care.
Bye.